My name is John, surrounded by epic leaders in the field. We're going to let them introduce themselves. Would you please start us off, Ekta?
Sure. First of all, I hate these chairs, man. Change them for the
My
next
God,
one.
I was just going to say, I can't put my feet up here. I'm going to fall over.
So that's a bit of a feedback.
Not built for women.
Good for women to give feedback. My name is Ekta Chopra. I'm the Chief Digital Officer for e.l.f. Beauty. I oversee all aspects of technology, data, security, as well as e-commerce and customer service. And those of you who don't know e.l.f., you're living under a stone or something. Because we're the #1 favorite Gen Z brand. And we have 4 brands. Basically, one is e.l.f. Cosmetics, which is our OG brand. And then we have e.l.f. People and Key Soul Care by beautiful Alicia Keys and e.l.f. Skin. So excited to be here. These amazing women.
So I'm totally fangirling because I love e.l.f. Beauty, so this is very exciting for me. I'm Michelle Wong. I am the Chief Marketing Officer at Sprinkles. I lead all of our product, flavor, innovation, and consumer marketing. My background actually is in the pastry world. I studied at Le Cordon Bleu and graduated with a Grand Diplôme in French cuisine and patisserie. I worked as a pastry chef, which then led to randomly 20 years in advertising. And finally, in my life, these two things have merged. I'm able to work in a business that I am very passionate about on my personal life and also my professional life. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for showing up.
And I'm fangirling over Sprinkles, man.
I mean, there should be a big swag exchange after this.
Oh. Are you going to fanboy over Metlife? Some
we're
life
excited
insurance
about
people? That's awesome. Thanks. I'm Michelle Froah. I work at Metlife, head up global brand and marketing, and really excited to be here. Love this community. We were just chatting in the back, been part of this community for a long time. Very proud to be on the advisory board as well. So it's so great to see so many people at 9 o'clock. I always give David crap for putting us up here at 9. So thanks for joining us. I, similar to you, Michelle, although not as glamorous, I didn't start in marketing either. I started as a mechanical engineer in the plant at P&G, and moved into marketing and have had so many wonderful experiences across different industries and different regions, and now at Metlife. So excited to share and be with you, John.
Honored to be here. So if we look to our left or right, depending where you're sitting, the subject here is Women in Marketing Leadership Forum. And to start us off, we've already heard that we're on stage here, or I'm on stage here with leaders. And so the provocative question of the morning to start us off is what will it take to drop the word women? So we're just talking about leadership in marketing. And it's a bit provocative, maybe not, maybe it's right down the middle, but I'm not best to answer that question. So I'm gonna pass that question off to my colleagues. What do you think are the big steps that we're missing in the business?
Well, I will say it's not really just business. I think it starts at home. And growing up, I grew in a culture where there was a distinction between boys and girls. And then I said, screw you, because I'm going to carve my own path. So I think it really does start at home. It starts with the taboos and the things that you have in the society. I mean, even like I have an 8-year-old daughter. She's a big superhero fan. She's hates pink and all of that stuff. I wish she would like pink. We started it at home. It's like girls like pink and boys like blue. And so when you have those kinds of mindsets, I think you're already sort of building this distinction between what can boys or girls not do. So I do think that until and unless society changes those norms and it starts at home, I think you'll still have to say women in marketing or women in leadership, because yes, hell, we're here and we're leading and we're creating the future. So
I mean, I think it is a provocative question, and because I spent the morning thinking about it, and I went back and forth, but I think you still have to be called out. it still has to be called out as women in leadership because there's not enough of us. And until it becomes de rigueur, until it becomes part of the norm to have women in leadership executive positions, to have people of color, to have the LGBTQ plus represented in decision key making roles, they have to be talked about and highlighted because I think women and many communities in our business don't have visibility and don't have the same amount of visibility and access and pathways, frankly. And so until that happens, we have to be given that spotlight until it becomes normal.
Wow, I completely agree. And I do think it's provocative, John, and hopefully I have a provocative answer. But I agree with you, Ekta, that I think it does start at home and especially when we're forming our kids' opinions and thoughts about everything that they encounter in the world, right? And what's fair and equitable and those kinds of things. I also think we can't drop it.
Yeah.
Because I think the other thing that we should be encouraging, not only our kids, but our peers and others to do is celebrate differences. And so, when you remove women, you're removing one of our differences that should be celebrated. And but I do think it should be expanded too. There's a Harvard article that I love that's talks about DEI not necessarily needing to be 2D anymore, right? It's just not about, your gender or your ethnicity, etc. But it should also be 3D. It should be expanded to your emotional experiences and how you've experienced the world and what you've done with that and different cultures, etc. And so I think when you apply that additional dimension, you pull out more of differences to celebrate amongst everyone.
So now let's bring it back into the organization a little bit. So those are amazing points, and obviously life starts at home, or the definition thereof. And so now we have to bring it into the organization and how the organization handles this responsibility and drives leadership essentials. Michelle, I'm gonna start off with you, and we'll come back this way. Right? What is the organization itself, for lack of a better term, the business, lacking to drive leadership and the essentials?
Well, where do we start? One thing I've noticed, I think, is that we don't put enough emphasis on building resilience. And I think that's a key leadership skill. And, especially when we're coaching and mentoring folks, to be leaders, it's like, you got to chart your career path to be, up, versus maybe encouraging people to take the road that's a little bit more curvy or go to places where you're rare, and you have specific skills that could be put in a different situation, whether that's different industry, different company, different organization or function. And you get to put into practice what you think in an unfamiliar environment, and you really step out of your comfort zone, right? And when you do that, you're going to have some wins, you're going to have some losses. But that's what builds resiliency and is really probably the most developmental thing I think you can do as a leader. The other thing I think it does, though, too, is it makes you practice inclusivity, right? Because all of a sudden you're out of your comfort zone and you might be the new kid, right? And so you have two choices when you're the new kid. I've been the new kid so many times. You can sit back and wait for someone to invite you in, or you can lean in and do the inviting and ask people to join you. And, really practicing, I think, that inclusivity is also a way to build resiliency, but also to help develop leaders for the future.
Well, I love what you had said earlier, and I need to read this Harvard article because I think that is truly key to choosing leaders and to giving people pathways and opportunities to get on the road to leadership is really expanding what we see as the right skill sets for the job. And I think that's the 3D, the three-dimensional piece is I would venture to say most of us probably have had a winding path to where we are today. And I think that's what makes us really interesting. And if you work in marketing, you have to have had unique experience. You have to be creative, and you have to those things are sort of what bring us together and create unique ideas and create collaboration and different perspectives and point of views. And you can't have that. You can't develop interesting work unless you bring together people that have taken a winding path. And I think it's really easy for leaders to kind of have a vision of what that person looks like, or what their educational path was, or what their work experience was. But I think when we open that up a little bit more, or actually a lot more, you really start to see the contributions that people can make and the doors that open because you have all of that inclusivity involved in that.
Well, I couldn't. What else can I add to such beautiful words that you've said? But I will share just my personal experience, and my passion from e.l.f. comes across every single talk that I do because I really love working for e.l.f. Beauty, and it is where I transformed from being a technologist. I worked in aerospace, man. It is all male dominated and crazy, and I had to push myself into conversations, to coming into beauty, which is all technically you think all women, but it is where I changed from being a technologist to a business leader. And that opportunity was something that, yes, the leaders saw what I could deliver, but then I also created my path. I created my role. I wasn't shy to talk about things that needed to change or transform. So I think it's, at the end of the day, it is about resiliency. And as women, sometimes we tend to sort of hold back, and we think our empathetic nature is our weakness. And it's actually my power. And my mom taught me that. So being empathetic actually makes me an amazing digital leader, because I can connect with humans and I can connect with the consumers. So I would say that it is about resiliency, and it is about inclusivity. It's also about knowing thy strength, and your strength as female, it is empathy as well. And I never shy away from that.
So we all came from somewhere, and resiliency is critical, and we've been taught certain things, to your point, at the home or at the workplace. Tell me a little bit about the mentors that you've had in this subject matter, where somebody said, no, this is how you need to be in order to be a leader. Did it come from a woman? Did it come from a man? Did it make a difference? And were there any attributes that they found that really resonated?
I think building off of Ekta, what you're saying is you're channeling your empathy, and I think one of my greatest mentors, what he said to me was, actually, I think I just need to let you loose. I need to let you do your thing. And I think what that signaled to me was, finally I got to the point in sort of my own personal development, but also my career, where I could truly be myself. And it's said over and over again, and I'm like, is this a corny trope? But truly, who you are is your superpower. And when I realized that, when I realized what I brought to the table, that when I went into meetings, my brand, my version of myself, was different and unique, and it's what got me in the room. It's what got me the contract. It's got all these things that came. It's because I really submitted to who I was, and I let that go. And it was really hard to do. It's really hard to do as a young person coming up in your career, because there's so many sort of landmines to maneuver around. But being able to have the freedom to bring my true self to work every day, to own my history, my background, that I have a distinct point of view, that my Asianness actually influenced my thinking, and using that in a way to sort of help drive our business, was really probably the biggest help and biggest push that I had in my career, was really allowing myself to do that.
When I think of mentors, I really put it in two buckets. One is my personal life. Who made me who I am is my mom. She's my first mentor in life. I love my mom, and someone that I really look up to. She's one of the strongest female single mothers that I know. So I think she definitely plays a big role in my life, who I am as a person. Other than that, I think all my mentors have been male. And they actually were my biggest cheerleaders and biggest critics. But that criticism or that feedback, like I gave you guys about the chair, really made me better. Okay, so next time the chairs have to be better. But what I will say is that, someone who really transformed me as a technology leader, John Hanachek, and he played a big role in my leadership. So he, sent me to this course in North Carolina called Leadership Through a Glass or Looking Glass or something. And that helps you identify 6 strengths that you have that are also your weaknesses. And it helps you learn how do you overuse and underuse them in certain situations. So I think that really pivoted my leadership, but it really came from, a male. But my personal life is influenced by my mom.
Michelle, is there anything you want to add to that?
I've had so many great mentors. It would be hard to like name them all, right? But I do think that as I've grown in my career, I've been more open to have almost informal mentors, and not just formal. And for me, seeking that out, right? And I think you can do that by really focusing on expanding your network of relationships, right? Not just I know you, but I know you, and being involved in groups like this. I'm on some boards within Metlife. I push out of marketing and do some enterprise activities, etc. And so when you focus on building relationships up, across, and even down your organization and your industry, you'll find that you have a huge network of mentors. And, inevitably, your career's going to go and have some peaks and valleys. And that's when you lean into that network of mentors. And, some are going to fade into the edges a little bit, and then some are really going to lean in.
Yeah.
Right. And then who your trusted mentors really are. And I think that's really important. Even when similar to your story, Ekta, even when I was growing up as a leader at P&G in the manufacturing plant, I think one of the most important things that a informal mentor who was male actually told me, I was like one of the only females, right? But was I was like 22, and I was in charge of a department of 35 men that were like 35 plus, right? And I will not tell you what they told me on my first day. I had a duck from a wrench. And I had some problems. I was like, geez, how am I going to, I'm the boss here, or how am I going to get the... And his advice, and such great advice that I carry with me really, even to this day, was you got to figure out how you're useful, right? And you got to learn what your team does, and then get out of the way, and let them do it. And you do your role of being useful. And it was a really big turning point, right? Because I realized, like, just because I had an engineering degree didn't mean I could go run the equipment on the line. But I did have some other skills that I could help, remove some barriers for them to be successful. So.
Can I just add
Of
one more
course,
thing?
please.
I think there's a distinction between mentors and trusted board of directors. Everyone who is in a leadership role should have a trusted board of directors. These are your 3 or 5 people that you always go to, and you can rely on them giving you no BS advice. You can be who you are, and you actually, sort of grow from it. Because everybody who tells you do a great job and blah, 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 that's great. But someone who can actually help you with your, opportunities, I think, is really important. So I think there's the mentors who you are inspired by, and they actually take you under the wing. But then there's the trusted board of directors that you sort of build for yourself for a future.
I love that. I think that there's like, because if you think about mentors, right, as the more senior person that's like taking you under their wing, and sometimes it is that.
Yeah.
But I think it's really important to have peer-to-peer mentors,
Yeah.
and also
And even those that are junior to you.
Yeah, really,
Yeah.
because everything we do again is about perspective. It's about getting point of views that are different from yours to challenge you, and I think even having sort of a more senior mentor, for me, it's been really valuable to have a mentor that looks like me. Actually,
Yeah.
that's someone who has experienced what I've experienced and that can help navigate things that are very unique to my experience. But it's also really important to have a mentor that is nothing like me. Again, because it's about seeing things in ways that I hadn't considered. And that's what true mentorship is able to do, is to open your eyes and pathways for you. And so having that diversity in who's your board of directors, I think really makes a huge difference.
So back to the first question that I asked, and the response was, no, we do have to have a purposeful intent to improve the leadership with women in the workplace. There's an expression: A's hire A's, and B's hire C's, because A's always want to be surrounded by A's to improve themselves, and B's feel like there's a risk if they hire an A because they might be usurped in their role. And when we look at how we're going through the hiring process, there's a lot of business metrics that we look at. Where has this person worked? Where did they go to school, etc.? Are there other attributes that we need to be looking at to bring in A's into the organization? Is it you mentioned empathy. Somebody mentioned empathy. Where do those attributes fit when we look forward for our hiring of A's?
Yeah, for me, I think, especially I like to give young generation a lot of opportunities, from being interns to like having a role of their dreams, and building a path for them, because I do think that a lot of young generation is not getting an opportunity, in some ways after they graduate and so forth, or they don't get the right mentorship. The one single quality that just is so important to me is that inherent hunger to learn, that curiosity. And the people who have that versus the people who don't, I think really makes a difference in, sort of how they're going to grow in their career. So for me, that hunger, like I will do anything to learn, the skill or to become better at this, really impresses me, and I've seen that really help people a lot. And I would say, like, I personally had that with a lot of roadblocks in my career, and that was the single biggest thing that helped me, is that question of like, hey, why do we do this a certain way, or how can we improve this, and having that, sort of that learning ability. So yeah.
I agree with that. I think curiosity and being a curious learner is so important, so important. But I would expand it a little bit too and say, what's the A that you're looking for? Is it just for work, and I have this skill set, or is it a broader, and going back to that 3D kind of, emotional experience kind of piece, is it a broader A that you're looking for? And I think, there's, to build on what you were saying, I think there's almost like a Renaissance leader that, for me, that would be an A, right? So, they're not just good at marketing or, understanding tech, behind it, but they also have other passions that they're curious learners about. And they put those passions to work, whether that's in their communities, with their families, with their friends, etc. And I think that exposes people to new thoughts and ideas that they can bring to their work, right? And so that's been something on my mind too. I do a lot of mentoring as well. In fact, do any of you have kids that are in college that right? That interviewing now for internships, etc. And, writing. And I'm like, oh my gosh, these kids are great. They really are like Renaissance leaders. They're very open, but, it's something that I think hiring managers should be looking more for than just, what are your grades?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll connect you with my son's LinkedIn profile. Yeah, he needs more friends.
knew that was coming. I think sort of echoing all of this, what I look for is again sort of I want to understand as much as you can in an interview, sort of someone's whole self, because that is part of it. And this tends to be like a throwaway question, I feel like, in interviews, of sort of like, what do you do for fun, or what's your passion? But actually, it's very telling. It's very telling. Like, what are you into outside of all of this? Because that actually impacts who you are at work. Are you curious? Are you creative in your personal life? Are you do you like being around people? Like, those are things that add up to a total person. And I know it's, we all work at different companies and really big companies, and I've had the privilege of being able to do this, sort of always sort of being in this mid-sized space. But when I had my creative agency, I interviewed everybody, and whether or not it was the last person, gut check, whatever, but I wanted to know who was going to be working for us. I wanted to know who this person was. And even at Sprinkles, I do the same thing. It's like I work with supply chain, but they don't report into me. I work with operations. They don't report into me, but we all work together. And I think as a leader, as an executive, I want to know who's joining this team. I want to know, are you curious? Are you hungry? Do you have endurance? Are you interesting? Are you going to bring these things to the party? Because it affects our business as a whole. And I love that process of being able to say, okay, I've met this person. We feel really good about making them a part of this family, as it were.
So I will add, my official title is CDO, aka chef, because I love entertaining and I love creating creative food. So I throw all these parties for my teams and my friends, where I just want to be behind the scenes, making the most beautiful piece of food plate that you have ever eaten in your life. So remember that.
So we have time for
I do that as well, but I
Party
add a
bites.
little extra in there, which is I love bringing people together that don't know each other around the table.
Yeah.
And the conversation that you can get over some beautiful food is pretty amazing.
It is.
Okay, I'm going to end with one more provocative little piece. So there's a great book out there called Why Gender Matters, and I would be remiss if I didn't bring in the notion of gender as part of this conversation. And in that book, it's by Leonard Sachs. I highly recommend it. They've done studies where children at the ages of 4, 5, 6, when they start to draw, have noticed that girls will draw nouns and boys will draw verbs at a very early age. And so little Billy will be drawing and a whole bunch of stuff. He may not be so good with the motor skills, and Susie will draw a house and flowers and a cat. And the teacher will come over and say, Susie, that's a beautiful house. I love that. And hey, Billy, not really sure what's going on here. And Billy's like, well, wait a second. This is a train. It's going off the tracks. The people are falling down. There's going to be a big disaster. People are on the way. And teacher's kind of like, well, yeah, maybe you could draw a train a little better. And so are we wired to certain things that we have to be aware of while we go through this process to bring forth people's innate differences?
Mm-hmm.
And is that possible, or is it on an ad hoc basis?
That is a provocative question. What I will say is, sometimes some people don't even know what their strengths are. And as leaders, you can help them see their strengths by giving them opportunities. And for me, I really love the Maslow's hierarchy. Knowing my team's motivation of what motivates them, is it money, is it title, is it a certain, the scope of role? And for every single person on my team of 45 now, and these are my full-time people, and I know what their motivation is. And it's very important to me because I want to make sure I make an impact in their life. I want to make sure when they leave or they're getting ready to take on a new job, they feel like I added something to their life. So I think it is, as a leader, I think it's your job to understand your team's motivation and know how you can help their strengths shine and play on their strengths. Yeah.
I think my style of leadership is I tend to be a vulnerable leader, and I often joke that my team probably knows way more about me than they probably ever thought that they would. But part of that is, again, sort of that's just who I am. I'm a sharer. I'm a giver. I'm like, let's talk about things, and it's reciprocated in different levels. Like some people are like, great, now you have my life story too, and and it doesn't go as far. But I think what it does is it creates that openness. I think as leaders, if you give, people give back to you. I ask a lot of my team, and I think we all do. But I know that I'm always giving them everything that I have. So I think when we're working with our teams, it's part of that understanding what is the motivation, but also really again understanding that whole self. Who is this person? What matters to them, and how does all of this? How does the work fit into that life? And because this is a sort of another tangent, but I think it's connected. is we often talk about work-life balance, but really it's integration. They coexist together, and I think the more that we understand each other as people, the more that we can support the people that work for us and give ourselves in a vulnerable way, the better that we can service them and help them grow in their careers too.
Yeah, I love that. Work-life balance is boring. It's very static, right? And you want it to be dynamic. I don't know, John. Like, I mean, I think we would need some kind of psychology degree versus marketing to fully answer your question. But I do think, obviously, people are born unique and have, innate things that are unique to them. And it's stifling, I think, probably in the environments and the cultures that we've created, that people can't feel like they can bring their whole self to work or to their communities, their family, whatever it might be. And so I think there's an onus on us to create those environments that are more accepting and more open. And I think that starts at home, like we were just talking about, right? Because the wider the environment that you make for your kids, for your teams, for others, the less insular they become in thinking what's right and what's wrong, versus like, well, what can be, and and the possibilities are so much more open.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining us. I think we're out of time now. Thank you, Brand Innovators. Thank you, Las Vegas. And obviously, thank you to our leaders.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.